Well, we have no reading, so our brother Jonathan will speak to us on Remember Lot's Wife.
Well, good evening, brothers and sisters and young people. Turn in your Bibles, if you would, to Genesis chapter 13. We're going to put a fair amount of the verses on the screen this evening, but we would like to have a couple of them open. Genesis 13 is where we're going to spend a fair amount of time. Also Genesis 14, and then over in chapter 19. So if you want to have those passages available, we'll be looking at those extensively as we go through tonight and look at the subject. Sister Charlene and I had the privilege of traveling to Jordan just a few months ago to visit some of the Bible lands, as they called it. And one of them was a site in Jordan that is basically been identified as Sodom. Now, some of you have seen, or probably quite a few of you have seen, Brother Lane's class from Bible school last year, the Winter Bible School. We're not going to go through all the evidences that he went through again, because we wouldn't have time. What we want to spend more time doing this evening is having a look at the actual site itself and the things that they have found there that help us in that identification. But we would like to just give a little bit of background for those who haven't seen those things. This is a Bedouin tent. You'll notice there's one addition to this Bedouin tent, almost the same as Abraham's tent would be, except this one has satellite. And not only that, but they have about a 50-inch screen inside, a flat screen television, and they just hook up their little alligator clips onto the power grid, and that's the way the Bedouins live today in Jordan. But this is a tent similar to what Abraham would have had. Very large tent, and when Abraham traveled, this is what he would have been traveling around in. We read in Genesis chapter 13, this is when Abraham went up out of Egypt, verse 1, he and his wife and all that he had, and Lot with him, into the south. And Abraham was very rich in cattle and silver and in gold. He went on his journeys from the south, even to Bethel, unto the place where his tent had been at the beginning, between Bethel and Ai. That's Ai, as we read about it in Joshua's time, or Hai, or Ai, as it's called over there. So unto the place of the altar, which he had made there at the first, and there Abraham called on the name of Yahweh. So here we have Abraham leaving Egypt, coming into really the hill country, the mountainous areas in the north of Israel, and not as far as the Galilee, but I guess you could say north of Jerusalem. And it's here that the story of the diversion of Lot and Abraham takes place, where the two of them go in different directions. We read in verse 5 that Lot also, which went with Abraham, had flocks and herds and tents, and the land was not able to bear them, that they might dwell together, for their substance was so great, or was great, so that they could not dwell together. So that's the description that's given of these two clans, Abraham's clan and Lot's clan. Lot, of course, being his nephew, his brother's son, who came with him from Haran. And there's so many of them that the land is not able to bear them. And so there was strife between the herdmen of Abraham's cattle and the herdmen of Lot's cattle in Genesis chapter 13 and verse 7. And because of that strife, and because of the huge amount of people that were all together in this area, the two of them decide to separate. And of course, Abraham gives Lot his choice of what he wants to do. And we read in Genesis chapter 13 and verse 10 that Lot lifted up his eyes and beheld all the plain of Jordan, that it was well watered everywhere, before the Lord destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah, even as the garden of the Lord, like the land of Egypt, as thou comest to Zoar. So this is one of the key passages in triangulating where Sodom was. First of all, it's where Abraham and Lot are. They're between Bethel and Ai. And Lot looks up from there and sees the plain of Jordan. So whatever this place is has to be visible from where they're standing at that point in time. So the archaeologist who sort of put this all together, because there's been this great debate as to where Sodom is, and a lot of people have said it's at the bottom of the Dead Sea, it's in the south, and they have some places down there where they sort of angled it. And he kind of reading his Bible said, that just doesn't make a whole lot of sense. So he took his Bible and said, let's forget very similar to what Brother Thomas did with the discovery of the truth. Let's just toss all the writings of the church fathers and all the authorities of the day, just take the Bible, look at it, and see if we can triangulate as to where Sodom is. So when it says that they're at Bethel and Ai, and Lot lifts up his eyes and beholds the plain of Jordan, the word plain there in the Hebrew is the word kikhar, which means round. And it's given as a round environ of the Jordan Valley, but also as a round loaf of bread, or a pita as we would know it today, or a round weight, meaning a talent of gold or silver or bronze or iron. So that's the idea of this word kikhar, is that it means something that is circular or round. So when he's looking at the plain of Jordan, he's looking at the circular area of Jordan. He's not looking at the area of the Dead Sea, he's looking at Jordan. So Dr. Collins, who was the archaeologist who sort of put all this evidence together, turned around and said, well, it must be then possible to triangulate where exactly Sodom is. So just sort of taking that evidence, we're just going to look. The Dead Sea, of course, is part of the Rift Valley, which is comes right the way up from Africa. And there is a circular plain at the top of the Dead Sea, at the bottom of the Jordan River, which is known as the Kikhar of the Jordan. And so it's somewhere in this area, the plain of the Jordan, where Lot was looking. Now they were both over in Bethel and Ai, which sit in the mountains of Israel. And if you look at the map here, it'll come up in just a moment. There's the two places there. If you come forward to Ai, there is a sort of a visible line of sight, but he couldn't see down towards the Dead Sea because his mountains are on the right-hand side. So as he traveled eastward towards Jericho, you come to the cities of the plain. So Jericho is one of those cities on the western side of the Jordan River. And if you go to the eastern side of the Jordan River, there's a whole bunch of archaeological sites there, which this archaeologist basically said, well, this must be, one of these must be where Sodom is. So that's just looking at the circular disc, the plain of the Jordan. Tel Tanu is one of them there. So there's Sodom. We'll look at some photos of this in just a moment. Tel Tanu was one of the other cities of Sodom, because remember there was the 5 cities, and there's a bunch of smaller ones as well. Then there's Tel Rama, and of course the idea of a tel is a mound or a hill on which the city was built for defensive purposes. And there is also Tel Kephraim, which is believed to be Gomorrah. And there's a couple more up behind Tel Tanu and Barakar on the north side of it there. So those are cities that are ancient cities. They're what they call Middle Bronze Age, and we'll just go over that in a moment, all in the circular plain of the Jordan. Now, when you look at that, you say, okay, well, we'll let him explain. This is him here. We'll let him explain what he found.
The rubber hits the road. Stood here with Lane Rittmeyer a couple of years ago when he first came over to start working on our drawings. He'd never been here before. And we told the story of Genesis 13 from here to George's drawing. He just said, I have no idea. From that point on, we're doing a lot of talk about Sodom. Go ahead. All right, let's follow the geography. What are we looking at? We're looking at the well-watered circle of the Jordan Valley, and you see this little spur that comes down? That separates the Ad and the Zeboim doublet from this kingdom. Okay, 2 different groups, because they have just as discrete a piece of geography on that side as the kingdom of Sodom has on this side. Okay, very discrete geography. Now, when King Pharaoh stood in his palace and looked over his kingdom, he could see it all. He could see it all because his border starts right there in the hills. The southern border goes all the way to those hills over there because the mound, you see where in the distance there where the dust is coming up from the factory, from the grapple back there. Right? The tail to there's a mound just this side of it, not the one right where it is, but just to the right. There's a mound. See the little minaret on the right? That's Talit Tanu. It has the same profile as this. Went down at the same time. It's a satellite. Is that Gomorrah? I don't know. If you stand there, if you stand right where I am, or right where you are, if you put your hand there and put your hand there, you see Kafrine. So at 10 o'clock and 2 o'clock, Talit Tanu, Tel Kafrine. See the bump? Okay? If you just bring your hands together exactly, there's a mound straight ahead. Tel Rama. Okay? So city, equidistant. City, equidistant. City. You come up right here. Do you see right where the cars are at the intersection? You see that up there? Just on the other side of the corner? Another Tel. Tel Tahuna. Another Bronze Age town. Okay? You go up higher on the hill just behind it. Tel Barakat. Another Bronze Age town. Okay? And not only that, right out here on the corner, the Hammam platform goes from the wadi, which runs right there on the other side of the little road. See the little road coming down? The wadi that runs down just on this side of the village. And that's all Hammam occupation platform. There's another small tel there. We have another one right on the other side of the city wall, outside the city wall. And who knows, with all the bulldozing for the agriculture here, flattening out and filling in what they've covered up. Okay? This thing was wall to wall, people and fields, agricultural fields.
So that's standing actually at Tel Hammam, which we're just going to see. This is looking from Mount Nebo, which we're able to visit, and looking down into the valley. And as you see into the valley there, the area of Tel Hammam is right in the circle there. And it's estimated basically as you look at that, it's about 1,000 meters in length, which is a kilometer. And that's why they have decided that this is in all probability the city of Sodom, because it's the largest of all of the cities in the plain. And so these were places that they knew existed. They knew there was Roman ruins on top of this one and on top of some of the other ones because they were raised. They were strategically useful places because they were places that basically would be elevated. You could build walls around. You could see your enemies coming. So this is Tel Hammam. This is a, I can't remember what they call this kind of a map. I was going to say topographical one. Relief map, that's the one. There we go. This is the breakdown of how the excavations have gone on the city, the size of it. There's a lower and an upper tel. It covers approximately 750 meters squared when you take the whole area into account. The upper tel is located here. It's fairly high. You have a good view over the whole valley. You can see all the other cities. We were actually standing on this place where he was showing you this is this place and this place and this place. That's where you were standing. And itself, it's approximately about 350 meters square, the upper tel. So this is the area. So what we'd like to do is just spend a little bit of time kind of putting the Bible side by side with some of the excavations that have gone on in this place. Because when they've gone here, they've surveyed it. This individual, Dr. Collins, has worked with Brother Lane for about 30 years. And so Lane gets called in to do all the drawings and sort of the surveying and sort of triangulate it. And he is involved in the digging side of it and identifying. His specialty is pottery. I've never been so interested in pottery in all my life. Up until this point in time, they're the most boring thing ever going. But now, all of a sudden, it has some interest. But this is the city itself as it's broken down. There's a wall that runs all the way around it, and we're going to see some of the pictures of the rampart. A temple complex in the southern area, and then there is the palace on the north, on the hill up on above, the northern, or the upper tell as they call it, and there are houses all around. The areas that they have excavated are signified in purple, and the areas that they basically have taken and done some surveying and excavation on there are in yellow, and we'll see some of those as we go. So right at the very top then is where we began as we walk through this place, and that is Tel El Hammam, and right there is the rampart, which was the first place we were taken to. You're going to hear a lot about Bronze Age, and didn't mean a whole lot to me, so we borrowed some of his information off Dr. Collins and said, okay, what are you talking about, Bronze Age and all that stuff? So when you put it into our sort of time frame, early Bronze Age is kind of Noah's time frame up to about Abraham. Middle Bronze Age is Abraham down through Moses, time of Jacob and so on. And David would be around 1000 BC, which would be what they call the Iron Age, which is later on. So the time frame for Sodom and the cities of the Jordan Kikar, or the Disk, is in that early to middle Bronze Age. So when they talk about Middle Bronze Age, that's the time frame of Sodom and Gomorrah. How do they know what age is what? Well, what they do is they sort of take pottery, and they use the pottery to triangulate and say, okay, this type of bowl was made during a Roman period of time. And they know that because you can go to Rome and you can dig around Rome, and these are the Roman styles. It'd be like Tupperware, I guess you could say. If in our day you were to pull out a piece of Tupperware, you can see stuff that was made 40 years ago as opposed to things that have been made recently. It might say microwave safe on it. Well, you'd know then it's got to be at least in the microwave era. Well, the same thing was true back then. Things did not change nearly as quickly as they do today. Fashions and styles come in today and go out so quickly. Back then, the design would stay the same for sometimes hundreds and thousands of years. That's what a pot for grain looked like, and it didn't matter if you were in Israel, Egypt, over in what is Jordan today, wherever you might be, that would be that sort of age. So looking at that, they're able to kind of say this is a way of dating cities and places, which I found entirely dull until we actually got onto the site and had a look at some of this. So this is coming to the ramparts, the first part of Sodom, the upper tell.
Right behind me, we excavated this second season, so it's looking a little rugged right now. The face that you're seeing there, that slope on the inside, that's the top of the Middle Bronze Age rampart that rings the upper tell. This shape, this height of the entire upper tell is created by that rampart. And this tell is artificial. So that's the natural, there is a natural spur that comes out here that sort of goes underneath it all. But everything about the 25 meters tall on top of all that is artificial. It's just built up. Most of that height is that artificial rampart that rings the tell. We estimate somewhere between 50 and 90 million bricks that came up by brick. And I'll show that to you on top. It's not just the nerve, it's individual laid mud bricks.
So that gives you an idea of the size of this place. 60 to 90 million bricks, individually made and formed, were used to build this. So as they dig down, what they find everywhere is mud bricks. So they have artificially made this tell, or this mound, and this is what he was referring to. This is the upper tell and the ramparts of that upper tell. So to you and I, it doesn't really look like a whole lot, just a pile of rocks. But as you get closer and as they dig in, as we're going to see, there's a lot more to it. So they would spend their time, and obviously we weren't here when they were digging. This goes on usually in the winter because it's too hot, and you may have heard the flies buzzing around when we were standing there. There was a lot of them. But they dig, and what they identify here, this is the mud brick rampart. So this dates back to the time of Sodom, King Bera, and built of individually laid mud bricks, which we'll see in a moment. And surrounding it is an Iron Age wall, which they believe was actually built by King Solomon, one of the cities that is mentioned in the Old Testament. He believes is built on top of the site, and there's a lot of evidence to support that, but we're not going to look at that at all tonight. So here is the upper tell, and there is a city all over this top area. And as you walk through there at first, to the untrained eye, it just looks like a pile of rocks. But as they start digging down, what they find is walls and houses and all kinds of stuff. How on earth they ever, sort of come across that when it just looks like a hill full of rocks is beyond me, but I guess that's why they're archaeologists and I'm not. So here you can sort of see what it looks like as we're walking along, and you can see some structures on the left there where there has been some digging that has taken place. And this is looking over the well-watered plain, and as we got closer to this area, this is the site of the dig. So they would dig 6 meter by 6 meter squares, or 6 foot by 6 foot squares, sorry, and they would dig right the way down till they got to bedrock, or if they found something really significant, they would stop at that point in time. So some of these pictures are just of the people that were involved in the dig back in 2007. It's been going on for about 10 years now. But you'll notice there, on the top there is these larger rocks. Those are Iron Age rocks. They were put there. This was built. This is a wall that's been built. They believe by the time period of Solomon. But below that, they have this mud brick strata. So this is like a layer. As you dig down, you get down to the mud brick layer. And it makes sense. This was a raised city, so you could look over the area. So when, in the time of Solomon, actually the Romans built on top of this as well, when you get to Solomon's time, they said, well, where would be a good place to build a city? Let's build one on a place that has a profile so we can look out and see if our enemies are coming. So they built on top of existing walls. So this is kind of what it looks like as they're digging down. And they've got the original mud brick layer, which goes back to around 3,500 years before Christ. So this is shortly after the flood. And then there are houses that have been added onto that around 3000 BC. And as they dig down into this, they begin to find the goodies, the pottery from Sodom. So as we were walking through this place, and you're sort of exposed to, here's this wall and that wall, it begins to make more sense once they start talking about the earthen jars and stuff that they've actually found, because the dating side of it then tells you where these places were. So we walk from the back, the mud ramps, down to the houses, and there is a palace that sits on the sort of pinnacle point looking out over the southern, or the bottom tell, and you can see from here the whole of the Jordan area. And this is what they believe would have been King Bera's palace. So this is looking back at the tell itself, it would be on the far side looking out over the valley. So this is, as we kind of went through there, he was showing us the actual remains of this place.
This is a huge Middle Bronze Age palace. All this reddish colored mud brick, called the Red Palace. All the walls were plastered. The height of this one wall is preserved higher than I can reach. Okay. So it's a massive house. It goes all the way down to the edge of the tell, to the rampart. You walked on it going all the way. It seems to go that direction, maybe 20 meters or so. So the palace is maybe 40 meters by 40 meters, something like that. Sits right on the edge. Middle Bronze Age. It's got to be King Bera's palace. This Sodom, that's King Bera's palace. You see why I put his palace right here. Man, look what he's looking at. This is his kingdom. Right? Look at the geometry on the other side. So this is it. Right up here, some of the plaster from the upper story. There's an upper story. This is floor plaster from the second story. So King Bera's like tromping around on that floor. Okay. This is coming from up. There's pieces of it everywhere. And so this is typical kind of plaster. But the interesting thing about it is, that would be, this is where we get all these hard mud bricks that are fired like pottery, coming from the upper stories of this house. Well, obviously, it got very hot when it burned, and that was the end of the city. That was the end of the civilization. So this is pretty exciting to me. King Pharaoh's palace, that's what I call it, because I don't know what else you call it.
So doing the extrapolation, if this is Sodom, and which is what they believe pretty much 99.9% that it is, because it's the biggest city in the whole of the plain of the Jordan, and now they've gone through the palace, and we went to probably 20 or something cities, and they all have a similar structure with the gates and so on and so forth, and this is the largest structure in the whole place, which they believe to be the palace then of the king, which of course we know, if you look at the Genesis record, is Bera. So in that place, he talked about mud brick. There, some of it is, and it's all covered up because it's made out of mud. So if it rains, it goes away because, not that there's a whole lot of rain there, but it's mud, so it will dissolve. But here you can actually see the mud brick as it's sort of exposed there, and he was talking about plaster on the walls. Well, he gave me a little chunk of this stuff, so this is the plaster from Sodom itself, right from off the walls, and it is, like he says, it is rock solid. And there was chunks of the different parts of it, the floor and the wall, where this plaster has been fired, and they figure the temperature to get that solid is about 6,000 degrees Celsius in order to fire something that solidly. So this is the mud brick construction they talk about. You can pick out the mud bricks there. It's a little dark, but you can see them there as they would have been put together. So literally what they are is clay that's dug out of the earth, put out into the sun, and dried in the sun, and then these bricks are taken and they use them to build, and then on front of it they'll put plaster, no different than we build out of studs and stuff and drywall over top to make it look pretty, and then we paint it. And they would do exactly the same thing. So they wouldn't have lived in mud brick huts, so to speak. They would have plastered those and painted on top of it. And so you can sort of see the evidence of this city that is behind there. The size of it, the 60-some million bricks that were built used to build it, gives you an idea of the population that must have been there in order to do this. And so this is what it looks like as they are digging through these things. We'll just share a couple of slides of the rooms as they're digging them out. Some of these are part of the palace, and some of them are simply homes of people. And you can see the terraced sort of look to it, and the mud brick at the top there. And here they are digging down right into the area and finding these different pots and whatnot as they dug right down. So they have these different pieces of pottery. We're allowed to, I didn't steal them, we're allowed to take them. So, but like everything down to the handles of cups and stuff like that, these are the handles of cups that people would have used who lived in Sodom. Not all of them at the time of the destruction. Some of them are a little bit later, but these ones we're looking at are in that period of the destruction. You'll see why in a moment. So here's a little pot they've unearthed, and then they clean them up, and they're painted, and interestingly, some of the designs on them, different pitchers. This would be a water pitcher or a beer pitcher or whatever it would have been at the time, and different jugs and pots that they would use to carry all different stuff. The interesting thing is the amount of these that they've found. Usually, a lot of this stuff, if a city's taken, would be carted off and people would use it because it takes quite a while to build this kind of thing. But instead, they've all been left behind and they've all been buried. So let's just jump forward for a moment to the time period of the Battle of the Kings. Remember that Lot went and dwelt in Sodom. If you come over to chapter 14, he went and dwelt in Sodom, but in chapter 14 of Genesis, there was an invasion that takes place with Christadelphians, and Christadelphians came out of the north, right the way down into the Paran wilderness, which is where there is great brass and iron mines down in the south. And from there back he went to En-gedi, and up north again to the site of the battle that took place with the kings, which would have been around what would be sort of Jericho, just below Jericho. And then he traveled back from there all the way up to Damascus. So just looking there at verse 8 of Genesis chapter 14, then went out the kings of Sodom and the king of Gomorrah, the king of Admah, the king of Zeboim, the king of Bela, the same as Zor, and they joined battle with them in the vale of Siddim. And the vale of Siddim was full of slime pits, and the kings of Sodom and Gomorrah fled and fell there, and they that remained fled to the mountain. So here you have a picture of Siddim, which simply means a field or a plain, and there was slime pits. And the word there for slime, as you follow it along, is really the idea of cement or mortar or clay. Some people have said it's bitumen, it's like asphalt, but it actually means the idea of a reddish clay, which was malleable and usable in sort of putting between bricks, so they would use it for mortar. So these pits that were there were where these men fell. And you think, well, how can they just fall in pits? Because, you know, these are grown men. I mean, they're army-trained soldiers. You would assume they have some brains in their heads. If there's a great big pit, you're not just going to go running into it. It's not like they're driving 4x4s and in they went. There had to be, like, what is with this? Well, the issue is that the slime pits or the clay pits are there today. Because the Dead Sea is at a very similar level to what it was in Abraham's time. And as it has receded back, what happens is the water on the surface or under the surface slowly goes back towards the sea. As water does, it finds its own level, as I'm finding out in my basement. And what happens then is that the ground just sinks. So all through this area, as we're driving along to Masada, there are these great open pits. And what they tell you is danger, open pits, because what happens is that they just give way. All of a sudden, a huge area will just collapse, sinkhole will appear, and down whoever's there will go. So they have to be very careful, because this is the Dead Sea. And if you're an Israeli and you don't really want to pay to go to one of the spas, you might decide you're just going to hop in the Dead Sea yourself along the area, along this area. So they've had a lot of accidents with people walking across what looks like a field. And then as they walk across it, the ground underneath gives out, and they've had some tragedies along the way. So that's these pits. But we read there that they took all the goods of Sodom and Gomorrah and all their victuals and went their way, and they took Lot, Abraham's brother's son, who dwelt in Sodom, and his goods, and they departed. So this is one of the homes in Sodom, and they went in there and they took everybody. Well, how exactly did they do it? It's very similar to, remember when David was fighting and left Ziklag, and his wife and his wives and his children were there, and the wives and children of his men, they went out to fight a war. And they came back, and Ziklag had been invaded, and they'd taken all their wives and their children. Well, the same thing had happened in Sodom. The men had gone with the king to fight Kedorlaomer. The women had been left behind, and the children. And, interestingly, Lot. Which makes you say, well, why didn't Lot go with Bera, king of Sodom, to fight? Abraham went with his trained men. Well, obviously, Lot wasn't really that interested in Sodom itself and its politics in that sense. But Abraham heard that his brother was taken captive. He arms his servants, born in his own house, 318, and pursues them to Dan. So Abraham, who is in Hebron, chases up Kedorlaomer through over to Sodom, up to Laish, and into Damascus area. And then he returns, of course, gives the spoils to Bera, and goes to Jerusalem and meets Melchizedek. Now, on our trip, we ended up going to Laish and Dan, and when we were there, Brother Lane showed us the gates of the city of Laish. It wouldn't have been called Dan in the day, obviously, because Dan hadn't been born yet, nor had he settled in that area. But that's just the geographical name. But the original city was Laish.
This is an historic feature you see here. It's one of the earliest constructions we have here after Jericho. Remember, the cities were built in the time of Abraham by building a big mud brick wall all around the city. Now, here you can see that on the tree now, this is all mud brick. And inside the wall itself, you can see it going around there, they built an opening what is the opening now is the wood, that's not the original opening. If you look close by, you can see there's an arch there made of mud bricks. But the earliest arches we have in ancient architecture, made of mud brick. There's only another one in Ashkelon. But again, if you go in there are again two chambers on either side of the central passageway, and there was the original gateway into the city called Laish. So this is not Dan, it was Laish. This is the city that was existing here during the time of Abraham. So he knew the place when he came down from Damascus, and the invasion was the kings of the north, and he came back and pursued them unto Dan. Now,
so this is the gate he was describing, and they built a great big canopy over this, because if they didn't, again it's mud brick, it would all disintegrate and go away. So you can see that the arch there, the wooden gateway there, is what they've built just to hold it up. And this would have been the gate of the city of Laish that Abraham would have passed by, both when he came into the land and also when he pursued Kedorlaomer. So the evidence of this is all through the land. And so we read in Genesis 14 verse 16, he brought back all the goods, and brought back also his brother Lot and his goods, and the women also, and the people. So Lot had not participated in this battle, but had been taken captive. Now the next time we find Lot, of course, is with the arrival of the angels in the city of Sodom. So just turn over, if you would, to Genesis chapter 19. Because here we have the period of time where Lot is found at the gate of the city. Now the gates of the city, there would be several of them through, but what the main gate of the city is right indicated here. So coming down from Bera's palace to the southern sort of area, and there you have the gate of the city. And we read that two angels came to Sodom at even, and Lot sat in the gate of Sodom. And Lot, seeing them, rose up to meet them, bowed himself with his face towards the ground. So this is the excavation of the gate of the city. It had several chambers to it. Here you can clearly see the mud bricks at the gate of Sodom. And here is stones that have been built on top. And you can see the mud bricks along the bottom area. And Brother Lane was involved when he went over there. And this would have been several years back. And excavating and then doing drawings of what this whole area would have looked like. So Lot sat in the gate. This is that very gate. And part of it's been blocked off. We don't obviously know the reason why. But this is just to give you an idea of the structure that Brother Lane put together. This would be the foundations and the remains of the area, and then they build on top of them based on the rubble that they find. So looking at the city, this is Lane's drawing of what, just a preliminary one of what he feels it would have looked like based on the evidence so far. The gate with the rampart would be right there, and this is an estimate of what it would have been based on the structure underneath. So they know sort of from the foundations where the walls would have been and how high it would have been based on the debris. It's interesting, as we were walking through this area, there was this little interesting looking pot. Or at least that's what we thought it was. Genesis 19 verse 1. Lot went out at the door unto them and shut the door after him. So this is when he goes to see the angels. And this is a door post, or a hole which the post goes into. So if you think of a great big piece of wood, in the bad old days they didn't have Stanley hinges that you could sort of screw in and your door would swing on. They would have a hole like this, is a post hole. A great big beam would go into it, and they would put all kind of oil in there to help it to turn, and it would swing on this little place here. So one of those post hinges. So Lot went out the door. Obviously we don't know that this was Lot's post, or a door post, but that's exactly what it would have looked like. And he pressed upon them greatly, and they turned in unto him and entered into his house, and he made them a feast and did bake unleavened bread, and they did eat. So here are some of the houses of Sodom, and they call this terminal destruction. So this is digging down to the level when the destruction took place, and we'll look at that in just a moment. So at that point in time, Abraham is having a conversation with the third angel that is still with him. And in Genesis chapter 18, just looking back there, verse 23, Abraham drew near and said, Wilt thou also destroy the righteous with the wicked? Peradventure there be 50 righteous within the city. Wilt thou also destroy and not spare the place for 50 righteous that are therein? So it's a very reasonable question from Abraham. So the angels have told him, we're going to destroy Sodom. And Abraham says, well, there's got to be at least 50 righteous there. Are you going to destroy the city for 50 righteous? Well, why does he start with a number like 50? Well, remember that when Lot had separated from Abraham, the two groups together, there were so many of them that they couldn't dwell in the land together. And so they split up. Remember when Abraham went to go save Lot, he had 318 trained servants that were born in his house. So let's say Lot only has half of that, 150 or so. Abraham's saying, well, surely out of that group there should be 50 righteous. And he keeps on asking, and he says, well, what about 40 and 5? Or how about 40, or 30, or 20, or 10? Out of all that host of people that the land couldn't contain, there's not 10 righteous left within it. And there wasn't. And there's a reason for that, brothers and sisters. And it's a pretty tragic situation. Not only is there not 10, but the angels then press upon Lot and they say, Hast thou here any besides, son-in-law, sons, daughters? Whatsoever thou hast in the city, bring them out of this place. And Lot went out and spake to his sons-in-law, which married his daughters, and said, Up, get you out of this place, for Yahweh will destroy the city. But he seemed as one that mocked unto his sons-in-law. So, even his own family, a few within that family, could they not make up 10 within the family? And the answer is, well, no, they couldn't. Why? Well, it was a Canaanite city, and they had their temples.
It's 3 meters thick and 22 meters long, this foundation. And we identified the matching wall on the other side. And Lane has determined that this meets standard. It's on the large end, but it meets standard Canaanite temple structures. So he's telling us big over there, it's Holy Holy's going to be right over there. So we're going to dig this out, starting with our regular official squares on our grid this next season.
So in Sodom, they find one of the largest Canaanite temples in the whole region. And we read in Corinthians, Be not deceived, bad company corrupts good character, or good morals, as we read elsewhere in the NIV. So here we have a situation where that whole group that went there is lost to Sodom. And they had their temples and other things. And so we come to the actual destruction in Genesis chapter 19. If you've got that open, just turn over to chapter 19, verse 23. The sun was risen upon the earth. Then when Lot entered into Zoar, then the Lord rained upon Sodom and upon Gomorrah brimstone and fire from the Lord out of heaven, and he overthrew those cities and all the plain and all the inhabitants of the cities which grew upon the ground. And that which grew upon the ground. So all the cities of the plain are destroyed, and they're completely annihilated. Peter puts it this way in 2 Peter chapter 2, verse 6, turning the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah into ashes, he condemned them with an overthrow, making them an ensample unto those that should after should live ungodly. So they are given to us as an example. If we want to live ungodly, if that's the choice we make in our life, this is an ensample to us. Why is it, brothers and sisters, that they have found it now, in this day and age? Well, I think that's pretty evident by what we see around us. So there in Sodom are digging down to the city, the inhabited city, and to get there they have to go through something.
Down there, the little wall going that way, and the little wall at the very bottom going that way. You see a little mud silo right in the middle? A circular area. That's a little clay line silo, grain storage. That's the middle bronze age. All of that you see in the bottom, that's all ash. See how it kind of collapses out from the wall? That's all that. There's a meter of ash and destruction debris down there buried in the house.
So a meter of ash and destruction debris that they had to dig through. He said it's a very odd sight to see, because most places you would have stones built on stones. In Sodom, you have stones, Iron Age stones, then you have this meter of ash, and then you have mud brick stones once again. So you have this meter separating the area, and you can see the black area right in the stones there. The more browny stuff would be kind of the mud brick side of it, but the black or the blackened area is the ash. Now they've got what they call build-over. So along comes Solomon, and he builds Beth Shemesh, I think it's Beth Shittah, I think it is, the city of the Achaeas, over top of this. And the Romans then built on top of that, but they're building on top of a layer of ash. And this picture here shows it really well, where you can actually see this whole meter of ash that sits on top of this whole area. And one of the points that Dr. Collins had to say, which made a lot of sense, he says, all right, we found this great big Bronze Age city. It's a massive city, has a palace, has a temple. It's made of some 60 to 90 million mud bricks. And to get to it, we had to dig through a meter of ash, and it sits right in the plain of the Jordan. He says, if this is not Sodom and Gomorrah, then would somebody tell me what it is? Because the reality is, on top of that is built Iron Age, which is Solomon's time, and then Roman on top of that. So they've dug right through the Roman and through the Solomonic layers down to this meter of ash, and then they find civilization underneath that. So under the ash, this is what they found.
Right there. See that? The skeleton's coming out here. There's ash all through the skeleton. The bones sticking out of this block right here.
Now, do you hear what he said? As they're digging through the ash, they found skeletons. So, under the meter of ash, the first thing they come across is bones. And at first, he was telling me that, you know, in Israel, if you're digging and you come across bones, the first thing you do is hide them. Because along will come the rabbi and say, well, this is a Jewish grave, and you can't dig there anymore. So half of the Temple Mount can't be dug, where they believe the Romans pushed everything off. All the good stuff, as Lane described it, is all can't dig there, because there's 5 graves they found, and the heads point towards the temple, so they know they're not Muslim, because Muslim heads would point towards Mecca. These ones point towards the temple. So they're Jewish graves, so they're not allowed to dig on that site. So he says for the first couple of years in Sodom, they found bones, dig a hole somewhere else and go bury them. But they kept on coming across them over and over again, which is very odd for a city, because usually you would have burial sites. In fact, around Sodom, there's all these dolom caves where basically they would take and they would bury people, and they've excavated some of those. But in the city itself, there's just this layer of ash, and underneath it, they are excavating remains. So here are some of those bones, skeletal remains, in the terminal ash layer, meaning this is the layer when it was destroyed, and in there are bones scattered all over the place. And he said it was very eerie when they finally figured out, well, wait a minute, these are the inhabitants of Sodom who died during the destruction. How do they know that? Well, when you look at them, like to us it wouldn't make a whole lot of sense, but they had with them a U.S. doctor, army doctor, who did a lot of, in Iraq or wherever it would be, they would do actual forensics. If a bomb went off or something like that, they would have to identify bits of bodies and whatnot. And he identified that the way these bones are placed, as they're just digging through, it's what they call bone scatter. He says this is what we would expect from an explosion. If a grenade went off or a larger bomb exploded, you would expect to see some bone scatter. Not only that, but they find limbs, but just the legs. The rest of the body's missing, right? So here is somebody's legs, 2 legs, but notice the toes. They are hyperflexed. People don't die that way. If you die of old age, you don't sort of curl your toes up, so to speak. You just die. This is somebody who has been bracing for an impact upon death. So he says you would see this in an explosion type situation. Not only that, but the femurs are charred and broken, and the rest of the body's nowhere near these legs. So the destruction layer tells you that these bodies were completely and absolutely destroyed, and there is bone scatter all over the place. And you can literally see the blackened, charred bones, which are different from the rest of the bones, which you can see on the bottom there, are more of a brownish color. So the question, he said, is, where's the rest of the body? What happened to these people? This isn't a burial site. When you bury bodies, there's 3 ways they do it over there. One is that you lay them in a ditch, or in a hole, and obviously you put stuff around them and you bury them as a whole corpse. Or they would have them taken and they have some decarnated, that was the word, where they would actually put them out on a dolmen stone. This is a Canaanite practice. Have all the animals come and chew off all the meaty bits, and then collect up the bones, and they would then take those bones and put them in an ossuary and sort of store them. So they would be in a special box. Or they would literally put them in a tomb, let the bones or the body rot away, and then collect those bones and put them in an ossuary. That's the 3 ways of burying. Here you have a whole city where there are just bones scattered everywhere under a layer of 1 meter of ash. And they're all no solid full bodies. They're all exploded bits of bodies all over the place. Kind of gross, but that's the evidence that is left behind. Mud bricks. Here is a couple of these mud bricks, hard fired at a temperature estimated around 600 degrees Celsius, so that they are now like stones. They're not mud bricks that you can just bust apart. Remember, Laish in the north, they had to bring that great big canopy over it so that it didn't sort of like just rot away, or as the rain hit it, it would wash away. Here, you've got mud bricks, the exposed ones, that are like solid stone. And they have roofing material that basically was infused with sulfur. And it's Middle Bronze Age patterns. This is how they built roofs back then. But they were fired with the sulfur. In fact, one of the things Lane showed us, but just going over this again, was the backside of one of these shards. They pick up a pottery shard and they flip it over, and it looks like it's been glazed. But it's glazed on the inside. You usually glaze a pot on the outside. And what it is something that's been superheated so that the mud or the sand has actually melted into glass-like structure. And when they sent it for analysis, Dr. Collins sent this off to a buddy of his in the States to have a look at it. And he said, "Oh, you found a piece of trinitite." Because trinitite was what they found in the nuclear explosion site in the Nevada area where they blew the bombs up during the lead up to the Second World War, and what they call desert glass. It has this greenish kind of look to it, and you can see it on there, and you can see it on the top of the other one there. This hard, solid, glazed look of this piece of, this was, in this case, pottery, and the one on the right-hand side there is from Nevada. And so they found chunks of this as far as 4 kilometers away from Tel El Hammam, which of course makes sense because all the cities of the plain were destroyed. So when the sun was risen upon the earth, Lot entered into Zoar, and then the Lord rained upon Sodom and Gomorrah fire and brimstone out of heaven, and overthrew the cities of the plain, all the plain that is, and all the inhabitants of the city. So they hope to go and excavate some of the other ones and see if they find a similar situation in all of these. They found some evidence already, but they want to go and take a look at some of the others. But in this, brothers and sisters, we have a great lesson. Sodom and Gomorrah, Peter said, were an ensample to those who after should live ungodly. And we read in Ezekiel chapter 16, verse 49, what was the sin of Sodom? It was pride, fullness of bread. The abundance of idleness was in her and in her daughters. Neither did she strengthen the hand of the poor and the needy, and they were haughty and committed abomination before me. Therefore I took them away as I saw good. Now, we hone in on that last phrase, abomination. But the other sins were pride, fullness of bread, and just way too much time on their hands. Not strengthening the poor and the needy, but they were haughty. And that is very similar to the age in which we live. Remember what the Lord says about the days when he will return. Likewise as it was in the days of Lot, they ate, they drank, they bought, they sold, they planted, they builded. Nothing wrong really with any of those by themselves, but that's all they did. And they didn't remember the poor and the needy, and they were full of pride. In the same day that Lot went out of Sodom, it rained fire and brimstone from heaven and destroyed them all. Even thus shall it be in the day when the Son of Man is revealed. In that day, he which shall be on the housetop, and his stuff in the house, let him not come down to take it away. And he that is in the field, let him likewise not return back. Remember Lot's wife. Now this, of course, is talking about AD 70, but the principle is the very same for us. Remember Lot's wife. And sometimes, brothers and sisters, we think of Lot's wife and we think, oh, she was more interested in the stuff in the house, in the life of Sodom. But just think about this. Genesis 19, verse 15. When the morning arose and the angels hasted, after Lot had gone out to try and bring his family out, the angels hasted Lot, saying, Arise, take thy wife and thy 2 daughters, which are here, lest thou be consumed in the iniquity of the city. And while he lingered, well, why did he linger? Why did Lot linger? Lot was a righteous man. Why did he linger there? Because his children and his grandchildren were still in that city. And while he lingered, the men laid hold upon his hand, and upon the hand of his wife, and upon the hand of his 2 daughters, the Lord being merciful unto him. And they brought him forth and set him without the city. But of course, his wife looked back from behind him and became a pillar of salt. It would not have been an easy thing for any of them to leave Sodom. Yes, there was the material goods, but there was also their families. There was also their children, his daughters and his grandchildren. But they had become so tied up in that city of Sodom that they just thought he was a fool at that point in time. So what holds us back, brothers and sisters? We live in a wicked age, an age of many distractions. We have way too much time on our hands, way too many things we can do. Well, the ancients had their colosseums, their entertainments. And we all know, brothers and sisters, so do we. We have colosseums. They had their arenas where they would go and play and watch the games. And so do we. They had their theaters and their forms of entertainment. This is just up the road from Sodom in a place called Jerash. And of course, we have our theaters as well. Cineplex Odeon. Notice the sign there. It's actually in the shape of one of those theaters, because that's what it's taken from. Sodom, well, they had their drink, whatever it would have been, all these potsherds. And of course, so do we. They had their love of money in that day, things that would pull them away. And so do we. I don't know if you ever noticed that the middle word of casino is the word sin, but it did pop out to me at one point in time. And as it was in the days of Lot, so it's going to be in our day. This is Brantford. And the place is actually called Sin City. And if that's not bad enough, Sunday is 2-for-1 rental day. But perhaps we don't have to go out of our homes even. Perhaps we don't have to go outside to have our distractions, things that will bother us, because we can just simply come inside and, as the cartoon says, pander me. But perhaps even worse than that, Sodom for us is simply one click away. And all the wickedness of that city is right there for us. And Peter warns us, brothers and sisters, and young people. He says, look, these cities are an example to all those who after should live ungodly. And he says Lot was vexed with the filthy lifestyle of the wicked. For he says, this righteous man dwelling among them, seeing and hearing, vexed his righteous soul from day to day with all their unlawful deeds. But the Lord knoweth how to deliver the godly out of temptation, and to reserve the just unto the day of judgment to be, the unjust to the day of judgment to be punished. And so that for us has to be that lesson of Sodom. What is Sodom to us, brothers and sisters? We got to make sure that it doesn't hold us back. When the Lord comes and it's time to go, there's nothing that's going to be here we're going to want to stay for. But we're going to want to go with him immediately, knowing the judgment that's coming upon this world. And whatever it is, whatever those things are that vex our souls, seeing and hearing them, maybe it's time to unplug them, to turn them off, and to get away from them and get our heads into this book. Because we have to remember, brothers and sisters, Lot's wife and his children. As we were talking about this, it occurred to us. When you're standing there and here's the spot and this is where all the bones are, right under this layer here. This could have been one of Lot's sons or daughters or grandchildren. Could have been one of the members of the ecclesia that went with them when they split up in their ecclesial strife, and one ecclesia and Lot goes one direction and Abraham goes in the other. It could have been one of those people who ended up in Sodom. And at the end of the day, how many were saved? Well, 3 made it out alive. But how many of them really were saved? 1, Lot, who was a righteous man. We're told that by Peter. But he vexed his soul, living in amongst those people, seeing and hearing what they did. We need to do everything we can so that we learn the lesson of Sodom. And don't take our families into these places. Don't bring this kind of stuff into our homes where our families live. Protect ourselves from it so that we remember Lot's wife and remember his family and those that were left behind and what happened to them. Because the Lord is coming to judge the earth in righteousness. And it says of Sodom and Gomorrah, if the mighty works which had been done in them had been done in Chorazin and Bethsaida, they would have repented long ago in sackcloth and ashes. Well, we have seen mighty works as a people. We have seen God move entire nations, bring Israel back into their land and plant them there in preparation of the kingdom. We have seen great and wonderful signs, and they have to impact us and help us, brothers and sisters, to turn away from the things of Sodom and to get ourselves out of there with our children before it's too late, so that we are not destroyed with its destruction. Because the Lord knows how to deliver the righteous out of those places. And so we need to pray to him and set ourselves a course to get ourselves out of there. And if we find ourselves in trouble, then ask for help. Now is the time to do it before it is too late. Because for Lot's family, when the angels came and they knocked on his door, and they asked him to leave, and they sent him out to get his children, and they wouldn't come, it was too late for them. Lot left, and the minute he steps outside of that city, or once he enters into Zoar, it begins to rain fire and brimstone, and his family, and his ecclesia, and his grandchildren, and his neighbors, and everybody else is taken away. Our Lord is coming. We have a hymn that says, he comes in vengeance, but not for thee. And so that's the people we want to be, brothers and sisters, ones who do not hold on to this world, but let it go. And whatever it involves, whatever ties us down, let it go. Because God is able to deliver us, and we pray that hour of deliverance would soon be upon us.